Hello, everyone. A few people asked about my background, and you may know I was in the seminary, I was also in the Air Force, but I want to go all the way back to my childhood because I did have quite a bit of supernatural happenings as a child. I grew up in a small Cajun town in South Louisiana, and it was a very religious place. Of course, my dad's a deacon, and was since the year I was born. So we were a very religious family, and the people typically were pretty accepting of the idea of ghosts. There was supposedly the ghost of someone who got killed riding a bike. It was just a few blocks from my house. And there were commonly reports of people appearing to relatives after they died. When I was 4, my great grandmother died, and a cousin of mine said that the morning after she died, she had appeared to her and spoke to her. That wasn't uncommon at the time. So during my childhood, I know several of my family members had supernatural occurrences, and those might be really good stories to tell, but ultimately, those stories are their stories to tell, so I'm not going to share them unless I get their permission. I did get permission from one family member. So, this family member, she was pretty early in her marriage. She had a few children, and her father had just passed away, so it was a really difficult time for her. And to help cope with that difficult time, she was in the habit of saying the daily rosary. One night she was laying in bed and she was trying to get through her rosary, and as she tried to pray, her lips couldn't move and her mouth wouldn't move, and she had to struggle to get the words out. As she prayed, she told me that she had this intense feeling of evil. And even talking to her now, it's been years, it's been decades really. She told me it still creeps her out how evil that feeling was at the time. But she was determined that she was going to go through that rosary and say the whole thing. So even though she had difficulty moving her mouth, moving her tongue, she struggled through it, and she started to hear the sound of clawing on the windowsill. And it was as if someone was just running their claws, their fingernails, down her windowsill, just feet away from her. As a kid, I had a lot of nightmares, and I don't know why that is. I do know that the main part of the house actually used to be a bar. And I also know that whenever my parents added on to the house, we knew people who lived near an old plantation home, and they had disassembled some of the boards for a slave cabin. That's the story I heard anyway. So they got this free wood, which just happened to be from that slave cabin. So for whatever reason, I had a lot of nightmares as a kid, and I also had sleep paralysis, and they were usually in combination with each other. A recurring nightmare that I had was I'm in the house, and my brothers and sisters are there, and they're going from room to room, just kind of talking and doing their daily whatever. And there's no real lights on in the house. It's more of a yellowish haze in the air. And the house is very dark and shadowy. And one by one, my siblings go outside or go into another room, and eventually there's no one there anymore. And I'm left alone in the house. And that yellowish haze, it starts to dim and it gets darker and darker. And then I'm there in the increasingly darkening house, and I start to see figures moving around in the darkness, peeking behind the doors, around the couch, in the shadows, and I feel that oppressive feeling of hatred, and it's disturbing. And then I wake up, but I can't move, and I'm laying in my bed, and I always shared a room with my brother, so I can look over and see my brother in his bed. But I can't move my arms, I can't say anything, but I can move my eyes. And I look down through the hallway into the living room, and I see something poke its head out from behind the doorway, looking at me. And it's got little horns on its head. That is a standard dream/sleep paralysis occurrence. It usually ends with me frantically trying to pray that God will send his angels down or somehow get rid of the evil so that this will end. Later, I found out that sleep paralysis is an actual diagnosed condition, and so part of me thinks, well, this was just something in my head. For whatever reason that I have sleep paralysis, it's medically documented, so maybe it's not supernatural, maybe it's not paranormal, but it sure freaking feels like it when it's happening. You always have that oppressive feeling of hatred. Why does it have to feel like that? Why can't it be a rainbow bunny? No, it's always evil. It's always oppressive. One time it was a bald guy in a black hood. One time it was an old evil looking lady. Most of the time it's these little dark figures peeking out of the corners. But I am open to the possibility that sleep paralysis in itself is just a medical condition that really freaks with your head. And it may be paranormal also, because there are things that have happened that I can't explain, and it could be. I don't know. So I can't really compare that with Lee from the Really Haunted channel. He has very different experiences. They're more of the poltergeist activity type thing. We never really had that when I was a kid. The only thing I can say is that sometimes at night I'd wake up and I'd hear music. And my dad was always big on, make sure you turn off the lights, make sure you turn off the radios before you go to bed. And so I'd walk to where I thought the music came from. And then all of a sudden I could hear it from the other end of the house. And I'd go look on the other side of the house, and it wasn't there. It was some like pop song, some like generic pop song sound where I couldn't identify who sang it or what the song was. But it was from some like pop radio station. But I could never find it, and just try my best to go to sleep. Please let me know if you like this kind of thing, the sharing of the personal stories. I have a lot from my childhood. I have more from my seminary days. I have some from my military days. But I do have a lot of stories that I can share. And if that is something that you guys like, please let me know. And that'll be it for now. Thanks for listening, and God bless you guys.